Hello everyone, Steve, G8NFZ, now on the last leg of the lecture video series on the IC7300. We've reached part 7. For those who are curious, the 7-part split was created to allow it to be absorbed in less brain-damaging chunks and, when originally presented, allow gaps for questions. As it turned out, by far the majority of questions were answered within the later parts. And so I hope that you've been equally able to understand how to sit down and drive the IC7300. Only 32 slides left. Put the 4 sugars in the coffee, and here we go. We'll now look at some detail of the spectrum scope and waterfall. You may hear it referred to as a pan adapter, but this term is not used by ICOM. Back at the front panel again, and we can follow up the miniscope button with a press. It calls up a reduced version of the RF frequency scanning and waterfall display, which looks like this. In this version, we are viewing the center mode scope and waterfall. The frequency range or span on display is plus and minus 2.5 kHz, in this case from 7.0975 MHz to 7.1025 MHz. This format leaves the lower part of the screen free for other panels to be displayed, some of which we've already seen. Press and hold the M-scope button to change the view. The full scope in its standard size now appears. This format leaves the frequency digits at their largest. It will also allow things like memory names to be seen. The bottom edge of the screen is now showing 5 scope controls. 1 swaps the button set to permit use of a further 3 buttons. I'll describe all of these shortly. For now, let us return to the other method of reaching the scope. Here on the standard menu, we have a scope button. This too will open the scope, but it will always be in the version with buttons using this method. Here, the scope is on view in its fixed mode. We've already seen this. Touch 1 to call the second button set. And in the second button set, we now touch the Ref button. Here's reference level set to -8 dB on the fixed screen and +8 dB on the center screen. With the ref level pop-up showing, you use the main tuning dial to adjust between plus and minus 20 dB. You can see that I've achieved a similar appearance in both situations, but that there is a huge difference between the fixed and center setting values. You may have to adjust ref with every change of effective receiver range. You're only changing the appearance. You are not affecting the signal at all, only what you see. Touching ref or the pop-up returns you to the scope screen with the new setting in force. Touch and hold def to set the level to 0 dB. Here's the marker turned on in a fixed screen. Note the T symbol on the top line. R is always there. And now I've touched hold. It says so on the top line. There's an adjustable setting for maximum hold time, after which the hold is automatically released. Touching the speed button toggles the scope scanning speed. The current speed is indicated by the small arrows at center left on the scope title line. Here's 1 arrow. 2 arrows for medium speed and 3 for fast. Press and hold expand set and the 4-page scope set submenu appears. There are 16 options in all. Important settings that are not default are center type display. By default, the middle of the filter. It's much more sensible to show it where the carrier would be. Marker position, fixed type, is the same. You have a choice of over 16 million colors for each of the color options, as usual. And most importantly, from page 4, you can access the list of fixed edges. Here once again are the 13 internal bands recognized by the IC7300. And now the amateur bands are shown again. Within the radio, there are over 21 filters acting upon the signal. Red arrows show the changeover points of both receive and transmit bandpass filters. These are switched electronically. If you tune across them, you may notice a difference in signal quality as you cross each boundary. Green arrows show the changeover points of the PA filters. These are controlled by latching relays. You may detect relay changeover noises at these points as you use the radio. You should note, however, that ICOM have carefully placed every filter boundary outside of the amateur bands. Nice. Within each of the radio's 13 bands, there are 3 adjustable band edge ranges. They're used to control the width of the spectrum scope display. We'll see how this works next. You can set all 39 for yourself. The only stipulations are that there can only be 3 within a band, and any one cannot be wider than 1 MHz. They can overlap. I have added the default band edge range set to the diagram. Note that below 1.6 MHz and between 30 and 45 MHz, all 3 available ranges are set the same, since there are no amateur allocations here to give guidance. You may note that the 60 meter allocation has no edges set, and the 10 and 6 meter settings leave parts of the allocation uncatered for. It will be up to us to make changes to suit ourselves. I've created such a set for my own radio. These could be used as a guide. On page 4 of the scope set menu that we just saw, the 4th option is fixed edges. Choosing this allows for the edges of the scope ranges to be set. The fixed edges menu has 4 pages which list the bands that you've just seen. Choosing a band takes you to one of 13 next level menus, each of which lists the 3 ranges within that band. For the sake of brevity, here are all 13 on one slide. Each of the ranges has its bands assigned. They can overlap if required. Touch any entry to edit it. Here, for example, is the edit screen for edges setting number 1 of the 300 kHz to 1.6 MHz band. Enter the start frequency, which must be within the band, then ENT to enter. Type the stop frequency and then enter. The return button drops back 1 level if required. Here is the set I have entered for my own 7300. I'm still working on 6 meters. When I find some signals, I'll probably alter these settings. You've already seen the WISI tuning function of the scope screen. Here's a reminder. As I indicated, the mini version of the scope leaves the lower part of the screen free for other panels. Here, for example, are the pre-recorded voice transmission buttons, or the Morse message buttons in CW mode. If called from an expanded decode panel, the RTTY memory buttons appear large. But if called from the smaller format, the RTTY memory buttons can also appear here.
Secure. Here's Delta Charlie 5 Victor Uniform. Delta Charlie number 5 Victoria United. Calling secure and standing by.
That was the sound from Delta Charlie 5 Victor Uniform, and the screen I had at the time I've frozen so that I could capture it.
Mexico Zero Hotel Golf. Return Delta Charlie 5 Victoria United. Can the morning here of the band is very, very strong. Square M here. And here, Square M.
I hope you can hear the cleaner sound I achieved by narrowing the filter and moving it a little way from the bass end by 325 Hz, as you can see on this slide. Just to reinforce what you've seen before, the recording icon at top right is running to confirm that what you just heard was recorded by the radio itself. No other equipment was required. And so here we are. You've either bought or are actively considering buying a very comprehensive piece of equipment. I hope that you've enjoyed, or at least put up with, these 7 parts of my IC7300 presentation. If you have any questions that you think I might be able to answer, then please leave a comment and I'll try my best as time permits. But remember, I'll be busy on air every chance I get. 73 from Steve, G8NFZ, Golf 8 November, Foxtrot Zulu. Now going QRT.